Welcome to Growing Up, a podcast about children and young people. These podcasts were written and produced in association with the Living Assessments Project and funded by the Wellcome Trust.
This is the Spotlight series. I am Monique, your host from the University of Kent, and in this series my guests share their childhood memories from the UK and elsewhere in the world, from World War II to the 21st century. All true life stories, all unique reflections of their era. This time I invite you to travel with Tepa to Pyhäjärvi, 500 kilometers north of Helsinki. Tepa will tell us what it was like growing up on the farm and playing freely in such rural environment. We'll learn about school life in 1950s Finland, about local delicacies, and also the surprisingly heavy load involved for the weekly journey to attend secondary school. I hope you're looking forward to this northern trip. Let's go and meet Tepa.
My name is Tepa. I was born in 1948 in Finland, in a place called Pyhäjärvi, which is about in the middle part of Finland. Let's say if you go from Helsinki, the capital, about 500 kilometers north, there in a small village called Ojakylä. I grew up there. I lived with my parents. We were 5 siblings, and also my paternal grandparents lived with us. We were 5 siblings, including me. There was actually a brother born after me, but he died when he was about 4 months old. And I was always told that he died because of high temperature. I don't know. I was never told anything else about why he died. We were born in about 2 years intervals. I had 1 brother, and then we were 4 girls. I was the oldest. And my paternal grandparents lived with us. We had a small farm. I think my father said that we had about 28 hectares land and a little bit of forest. We had cows, horses, pigs, sheep, tractor. Later, I think, I don't know, initially my father had a tractor. And I was told about my birth that I was born in Sauna. It was not very much after the war when I was born, and Finland was very poor. And in Sauna, the hygiene was the best in Sauna because there was warm water, and So my paternal grandmother, and I think maybe a midwife from the village also helped with the birth. At that time, the old house had been sort of demolished, and just a house where a new house was built. And when I came from Sauna, I was brought into the new house. My grandfather and my grandmother were working on the farm, and my mother and my father were working the farm, and that was their main employment. I think it just gave enough sustenance. In the summertime, we as children, we had to always go to the forest and pick up berries and store them for the winter. And we had to go and pick up mushrooms. And grandmother was good in knowing which is poisonous and which is not poisonous. And then my father was part of the hunting team for elks. One part of the year, and usually in the autumn, a group of people were allowed to hunt for elk, and so if they got so many elks, maybe 1 or 2, and then this group divided the meat between them, and that was then stored for the winter. And same thing was also about the pigs, that they were slaughtered after some time, and that's how we got the meat and the milk from the cows. So it was quite a sort of a basic lifestyle, I must say.
But plenty to eat.
Well, yes, I must say we were not starving, but I remember that only for the Christmas we saw fresh fruits, apart from what was grown in the garden, like red currants and black currants and some strawberries, but only apples or oranges for the Christmas. That was a delicacy.
Was it a very small village then? Were you close to other houses or farms? And did you have the opportunity to play with other children or only with your siblings?
The village was very small. We had about 4 neighbors. The village was like along one of the main roads in that end of the village where our house was. There were lots of children. The neighbors had, I think they had seven children, and in our house they had 5 children, and then they had 4 children. So we were all these children. We could play together, and that's what we did. And in that same village, my mother's siblings had married local men. So I had a lot of cousins around in the same village as well. We also, met and played together because we were related, of course. Of course, but most of the people in that village, they were farmers. There were no any professionals that I think. They were smaller farmers or bigger farmers. I remember it was a lot of fun with playing with all the children together. And in the countryside, it can be quite dangerous for children to play in different ways because it is not like today that, health and safety. I remember in one occasion, because we had 3 wells on our yard. We didn't have running water, of course, in the house. So we had to bring the water from the well, and there were 3 wells, and the well had a kind of a wooden lid. One of the wells, all the wells had a wooden lid, and then you put the bucket there and you draw the water. So once I was playing with some children, and we were running, and I ran through the well, so that I stepped on the lid, and lid was rotten and broke. Fortunately, I got stuck in the lid, so I didn't fall into the well, which was maybe about 5 meters deep or something. So I always remember that I nearly fell into the well, but got up myself. I think I was about 7, 8 or something. And in the other occasion also, there was a very small river nearby, and there we used to go swimming. But that time, I think I didn't know swimming very well because that happened later. So I went there with my friends and one cousin who was quite much older than I was. And I was maybe 5, 6 years old of age. And then the river, of course, flows, and there was quite a strong flow, and it got hold of me. So I was floating on the river, but this cousin of mine luckily sort of caught me. Yeah, so there were lots of things like that where you can get hurt. Like I remember my brother climbing the roof of our house. There was a long ladder because the chimney sweep had to go, come and clear the chimney. So there was a long ladder against the roof, and maybe I don't know how high the house would have been, 10, 15 meters or something. And he climbed there, and he had very slippery shoes on him, and somebody had to go and save him. So those kind of things, walking in the muddy ditches, where we found some kind of a mud that you could use as a play-doh. Oh my goodness! It was fun.
Was there a school in that village? Was that your first school, or did you have to go further afield?
Actually, it was quite funny. My mother's parents were also lived in the village, about 4 kilometers away from where we lived. And on their yard, there was a building that initially was the school. It had only 1 classroom, and that is where I went the first year. So I had to walk to school, of course, walk or ski. There was no any other transport. So all the children had to walk to school. during the winter it could be quite cold. And those days we didn't have proper shoes. We had only wellies. And I remember sometimes you had to put the newspaper in the welly because they were usually they bought you two big wellies so that when you grow, you don't have to buy so many pairs. That's where I went to school, so about 4 kilometers away. And then the new school building was built, which was a little bit nearer, about 3.5 kilometers. But it was a better building in the sense that there were more classrooms for different ages.
What would you say is your first memory of going to school?
I remember festival. Usually the Mother's Day festival was celebrated in Finland. Second Sunday of May, we were dressed up. I actually had a national dress because my mother's sister was a very good dressmaker, and she made a national dress for me and two of my cousins. And I think we were only 3 girls that wore the national dress for the Mother's Day festival. And all the mothers came there, of course, and then the children. And usually then children had some program, they sang, and there was a little play.
And what about your secondary school? Where was that?
Oh, my secondary school was very far away. I mean, by those days, it was about 20 kilometers away. I had to go by bus, but actually, I couldn't go there every day. There were not so many buses going there so that I could go in the morning and come back in the evening. But I had to go once a week, and then I went to live with my auntie, my father's sister, who lived about 5 kilometers away from the school. Every Monday morning, I took the bus, and because my father didn't have sort of a money to pay for his sister for my upkeeping, I had to carry a big can of milk with me to take to her. So I remember it was 6 liters of milk, and it was bread that my mother had baked, and butter, and with my school books and some clothes. So I had to carry that thing every week. When I came to the location where the bus stop, from there I had to walk about 1 kilometer to the school, carrying all those things, and store it in the school all day when I was in the school. And then I had the bike. That time I had the bike, so that was kept there at the school, so I could sort of ride the bike to my auntie's place, and then I came back for the weekend. Repeated every week.
And repeated even in the depth of the winter with loads of snow?
Yes, even in the winter. And I remember that the milk froze in the can.
Do you remember who was your best friend at school?
Yes, I remember in secondary school, I got a good friend, and actually we are still friends. Her name is Rita-Lisa. She stayed my friend with all these years. Even if I have moved around in the world, we still keep contact. She was the best of the class.
So did you manage to see her even during the school holidays?
Yes, she lived quite far from my home, maybe about 30 kilometers, 35 kilometers away from my home. But I could go take the bus there and stay with her in her home. She actually lived with her grandmother. Her mother had died, and her father was somewhere else and found somebody else. Yeah.
So what did you do together, you two?
I think we read books. We went out playing. We just had a lot of fun. I remember once we went to the lakeside, like a camping site, and grill sausages and things like that.
Do you remember if there were any disabled children in your school?
No, I can't remember that. Maybe now thinking back, that maybe it was a kind of a hidden disability that was not sort of so much on the surface, or it was not recognized, but not any sort of a physical disability that I remember.
Do you remember if there were groups of pupils that would gather together by affinity? For example, the studious ones, the trendy ones, maybe the rich ones. And were you part of one of these groups?
Well, yes. Now, when you mention it, I remember in a secondary school, there were two girls who were very trendy. They were children of the local shopkeepers. Those days, you had kind of dresses that you had starched a petticoat under the dress, and so it was very fanciful those days. So these two girls, they were very fancy. They had very fancy dresses, and I wasn't part of that at all. I had my friend Rita Lisa. Then there was another girl called Pirja, and we sort of kept together. So yes, I was not part of the trendy one.
Did you do sports at secondary school, and what were the facilities like?
Well, we did sports. We played something that is called baseball, but it is not like American baseball. You hit the ball and you run and you try to come home. And then, of course, we did skiing, skating. In secondary school, we had the gymnastics hall. And we did gymnastics, but no swimming pool. I learned to swim in the lake, which was about 15 kilometers away from us. So I cycled to the lake and took some classes, swimming classes. And so that's where I learned to swim one summer.
Oh, I had never heard of organized swimming lessons in a lake. How wonderful. What was your favorite subject at school? And do you know why it would have been your favorite subject?
I generally liked reading books. Then in the secondary school, I liked handicraft. I liked cooking. I was very bad in maths, and I didn't like history. I liked language. I always had to study Swedish language. That was the compulsory. At one point, I thought that I wanted to become a teacher in handicraft.
Were there any after-school activities in the evening?
No, there were no any after-school activities those days. Nothing at all. When the school was over, you went home. That's it.
Were there any groups equivalent to the Scouts or Guides?
In the small village where I lived, and then when I lived in secondary school, when in my auntie's place, there were no any organizations that arranged activities for children, not to my knowledge. It is sad that there wasn't such, but that's how it was.
If you were to remember your school as a smell, what would it be?
From the primary school, I can remember the smell from the kitchen because there was my auntie was the chef, was making food in the kitchen in the primary school. Every day, of course, she made lunch for all the children. And Thursday, especially, we had pea soup and pancakes. So the smell of pea soup.
I think I would have a little preference for the smell of pancakes, but hey, you can't have everything. At least you could eat them. As a child, did you go on holiday or was it only stays in your family?
The holidays were not known like they are today. I remember only once that my father and mother, the whole family, we went to this lake that was about 15 kilometers away from us, and there some of our cousins lived nearby there. So we went to visit the cousins, and at the same time we went to the lakeside. And I remember my mother and father also wading into the lake and the children playing. We were playing there. That is the only holiday I remember. We never went anywhere further in the country and abroad, of course, not never. And in summer holidays, of course, this was the working time for the farmers. So my cousins used to come to us instead and help with the, what is it called?
Harvesting.
Help harvest with harvesting. Yes. So they could stay maybe a month with us and do the harvesting. That was the holiday.
What was your favorite meal as a child?
Christmas time we had pork and rice porridge where one almond was hidden, and who finds the almond is the lucky one. Then, of course, times when my father got some elk meat and we had like a casserole of elk meat. That was a sort of a little bit of luxury. And then berries, I remember the blueberries from the forest. And then another berry that I liked very much is cloudberry, yellow berry that grows in the marshes and is considered as delicacy in Finland. Berries were my favorites.
I'm going to ask you a clarification there. What is it that was hidden and people who are lucky had to find? And was that in the rice porridge?
Yeah, the rice porridge. In the rice porridge, there was one almond nut was hidden there, and then we ate the rice porridge with sugar and cinnamon and milk. And then one who found the almond was the lucky one.
Were there any food you particularly disliked?
No, I can't remember anything. I think we had to eat everything that was put on the table. That was the thing. Me and my sisters, we didn't say, no, we don't like this thing.
What do you remember about going to see the doctors as a child?
Going to see the doctors? I never went to see the doctors. I don't remember ever going to see a doctor.
Was there a school nurse?
Not that I remember. There was no school nurse. Of course, I had all our vaccinations. Maybe that was given in the school.
Did you ever had to go to hospital as a child, even to visit someone?
No, as a child, I never went to the hospital.
In general, when were you the happiest during your childhood?
I think maybe everything was quite the same. I don't remember especially being unhappy. Well, I was always happy when my cousins came during the summer and when we could sort of spend one whole month maybe together and play. And of course, I was happy with my friends. Then there's one occasion, of course, when I got my first bike.
I know you talked about one brother who died very, very young. Apart from that tragic event, has there been a negative event, a tragedy that hugely impacted your family?
I must say that sometimes I felt that I would have liked to have that brother, my brother who died when he was 3 months old. Sometimes I remember feeling that, oh, it would have been so nice if he was here. I remember my grandfather passing away. I think I was about 4 years old. It was a winter, and he came from outside, laid down in the living room on a kind of a sofa, and he just passed away.
When you were upset or worried, who did you go to for support?
I think I dealt it with myself. I think I was not that kind of a child who was sort of showing emotions.
How did you do that?
I have no idea.
How would you describe your childhood in a few words?
It was very ordinary childhood. There was nothing very low or very high. Everything was sort of a standard leveled. It was to me very sort of a leveled childhood.
Is there an object from your childhood that holds a particular emotional importance to you?
Maybe the first book that I had when I went to school. I kind of see the colors on the cover, and that it was quite sort of worn out. And yes, that is the only thing I can remember.
Can you see today the influence your childhood experiences have had on the person you are now?
Yes, I think that somehow that there was not something very drastic or something that sort of hurt me very much. So I think that has had some kind of an impact that I don't go on sort of a brooding on something which has happened a long time in the past. It hasn't sort of stuck in my unconscious. So I think I can keep myself in balance. At the same time, when I meet people who have had quite tragic experiences in their childhood, at the same time I think I have to try to understand those people today, that it can have impact on the adult life. So one can say maybe I don't really understand people who have had a very difficult childhood. Anyway, I try to understand. In my case, I think that my parents, they were not educated. They could read and write, but they had very little school experience. In a way, they treated all us equally. So not one was favorite and like that. So I think that they did well there.
Is there a particular smell or taste of food that takes you back in time?
Yes, there is a particular smell of fragrance, what you call it. When I came home from the secondary school after being away a week, and I opened the door to our house, and there was a kind of whiff of my mother had baked cinnamon buns, and I just loved it. Fresh cinnamon buns.
What advice would you give to your 10-year-old self?
I would tell myself, be positive, be inquisitive, always ask questions, try to learn as much as you can from other people and from the books, and be nice to all people around you.
Well, Tepa, it's been lovely listening to you. Thank you so much for your contribution to our podcast, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you very much.
If you've enjoyed this episode, follow us on Twitter at living_assess. To find out more, search online for the Living Assessments Project.